The Graham Norton show had hosted thousands of celebrities over the years, but nothing could have prepared viewers for what happened when veteran Labour MP Diane Abbott delivered a comeback so savage it left the usually quick-witted host completely speechless and the studio audience gasping in disbelief. It was supposed to be a light-hearted Friday night chat show appearance. Abbott was on the famous red couch promoting her new memoir, alongside Hollywood stars and musicians, discussing her decades in British politics with Norton's trademark humour and warmth. The conversation had been flowing smoothly until Norton made what he thought was a harmless joke about politicians and honesty. What happened next would become the most viral moment in Graham Norton show history. Abbott's response wasn't just witty, it was a precision-guided missile that exposed uncomfortable truths about media treatment of black women in politics, while simultaneously dismantling Norton's own credibility with surgical precision. The audience's shocked silence, followed by thunderous applause, would be replayed millions of times across social media platforms. Before we dive into this incredible moment that had Abbott destroyed Norton trending worldwide for 3 days straight, let us know in the comments where you're watching from, and don't forget to smash that subscribe button. You won't want to miss these moments when political legends show exactly why they've survived decades in the public eye. Norton sat frozen on his chair, his famous smile replaced by genuine shock, as he realized he had just been intellectually outmatched by someone he had clearly underestimated. The studio cameras captured every second of his stunned expression as Abbott sat calmly, having delivered what would become one of the most quoted comebacks in British television history. To understand why this moment was so explosive, you need to know who these two people are and what they represent in British culture and media. Graham Norton is arguably Britain's most beloved chat show host. At 61, the Irish comedian has dominated Friday night television for over 2 decades, with his witty banter, celebrity interviews, and ability to make even the most serious guests laugh. His show is a British institution, consistently ranking as one of the BBC's most popular programs, and attracting A-list Hollywood stars who specifically request to appear. Norton built his reputation on being quick-witted, charming, and slightly mischievous. He's known for asking cheeky questions that other hosts wouldn't dare, often catching celebrities off guard with his humor. His success comes from making guests feel comfortable while entertaining audiences with spontaneous moments and unexpected interactions. But Norton's approach sometimes involved gentle mockery of politicians, whom he often portrayed as stuffy, dishonest, or out of touch. His audience expected him to poke fun at political figures, and he rarely faced pushback from guests who were usually grateful for the exposure and platform his show provided. Diane Abbott represents something entirely different in British politics. At 70, she's the longest-serving black MP in Parliament, first elected in 1987, when there were virtually no people of colour in the House of Commons. She's been a pioneering figure who broke barriers and faced decades of racist and sexist abuse that would have ended most political careers. Abbott's journey to political prominence was extraordinary. Born to Jamaican immigrants, she won a scholarship to Cambridge University, worked as a civil servant, and became a journalist before entering politics. She was part of the first wave of black MPs who changed the face of British politics forever. Throughout her career, Abbott has faced treatment from British media that no white male politician would tolerate. She's been subjected to racist caricatures, personal attacks on her appearance, and coverage that focused more on her mistakes than her achievements. Despite this, she's remained in politics for over 3 decades, serving in various shadow cabinet positions, and becoming one of Labour's most recognisable figures. The stakes for this particular encounter were higher than they appeared. Norton's show represented the British establishment's approach to political coverage: light, entertaining, and often dismissive of serious political issues. His audience expected politicians to be grateful for the platform and accept gentle mockery as part of the deal. Abbott's appearance represented something different. She wasn't there to be entertainment, or to accept condescending treatment disguised as humor. She was there as an accomplished political figure promoting her memoir, which detailed her groundbreaking career and the barriers she had overcome. The memoir itself was significant because it documented the racist and sexist treatment Abbott had endured throughout her career, much of it from media figures who presented themselves as progressive and inclusive. The book had already sparked conversations about how black women in politics are treated differently from their white male counterparts. Norton's usual approach of gentle political mockery was about to collide with someone who had faced real consequences from media treatment and wasn't willing to accept condescending humor as harmless entertainment. The cultural moment was ripe for a confrontation that would expose deeper issues about privilege, representation, and respect in British media. The other guests on the show, including A-list actors and musicians, were about to witness something unprecedented. A seasoned politician refusing to play the expected role of grateful guest accepting entertainment industry condescension. The confrontation began innocuously enough. Norton was discussing Abbott's memoir and her long political career when he decided to make what he thought was a harmless joke about politicians' relationship with truth. "Diane, you've been in politics for over 30 years, Norton said with his characteristic grin. "That's quite an achievement in a profession where honesty isn't exactly the strongest suit. How do you manage to keep a straight face when you have to defend some of the things politicians say?" The question contained the casual dismissiveness that Abbott had endured throughout her career, the assumption that politicians, including her, were inherently dishonest, and that their work wasn't worthy of serious respect. Abbott smiled slightly, but her response revealed she wasn't going to play along with Norton's expected dynamic. "Graham, that's interesting, coming from someone in television. Should we talk about honesty in media versus politics?" Norton looked slightly surprised but pressed on, assuming he could maintain control of the conversation. "Well, at least when we lie on television, we're trying to entertain people. Politicians lie to get votes." The studio audience chuckled, expecting this to be typical Norton banter that would lead to harmless political humor. But Abbott's next response shifted the entire dynamic. "Graham, you say you lie to entertain people, but what about when your industry lies about people like me? When you present racist caricatures as entertainment, or when you allow politicians to be treated differently based on their race or gender, is that entertaining? Or is it harmful?" The question caught Norton off guard. He wasn't used to guests challenging his industry or his own role in media representation. The studio audience sensed the conversation taking a more serious turn. "I think we try to be fair to everyone," Norton replied, but his confidence was clearly shaken. "Comedy sometimes pushes boundaries, but it's not meant to be harmful." "Fair to everyone?" Abbott repeated, her voice remaining calm but pointed. "Graham, I've been on television for decades. I've seen how different politicians are treated by shows like yours. When male politicians make mistakes, they're portrayed as human. When I make mistakes, I become a meme. Do you see the difference?" Norton was beginning to realize he had walked into a conversation he wasn't prepared for. "Well, social media has changed how everyone gets treated." "Has it?" Abbott interrupted gently. "Or has social media just made visible the prejudices that were always there?" "Graham, your show has hosted dozens of politicians over the years. Can you think of any white male politicians who've been mocked for their appearance, the way women politicians are? Can you think of any who faced the kind of personal attacks that black politicians routinely endure?" The questions were precise and uncomfortable. Norton's usual deflection tactics weren't working against someone who had clearly thought deeply about these issues and lived with their consequences. Other guests on the show, including a prominent actress and a popular musician, were watching the exchange with growing fascination. This wasn't the typical political chat they expected on Norton's show. "I think everyone in politics faces criticism," Norton said weakly, clearly struggling to find his footing. "Criticism, yes," Abbott agreed. "But Graham, there's a difference between political criticism and personal vilification. When people criticize my policies, that's politics. When they make racist jokes about my appearance or intelligence, that's something else entirely. And when television shows normalize that kind of treatment by presenting it as harmless entertainment, they become part of the problem." The studio audience was now completely silent, sensing they were witnessing something unprecedented. Norton's famous confidence was visibly cracking as he faced someone who wasn't willing to accept his usual approach to political discussion. Comedy writers and political commentators were unanimous in their praise for Abbott's performance. "She didn't just beat Norton at his own game," wrote Guardian columnist Owen Jones. "She changed the rules of the game entirely. This is how you challenge media bias with facts and logic." Norton himself struggled to recover during the remainder of the show. His usual quick wit and confident banter were replaced by nervous energy and obvious discomfort. The other guests, clearly uncomfortable with the tension, made polite conversation, but the atmosphere remained awkward until the show's end. The BBC faced immediate pressure to address Norton's comments and the broader issues Abbott had raised about representation and treatment of black women in British media. Initially, the corporation released a bland statement about respectful dialogue and diverse perspectives, but public pressure forced a more substantial response. Media critics who had spent years analyzing British television's treatment of politicians, particularly black women, seized on the moment as vindication of their long-standing concerns. Diane Abbott just did in 10 minutes what media studies academics have been trying to explain for decades, wrote Dr. Kehinde Andrews of Birmingham City University. International media picked up the story as an example of how racism and sexism operated in seemingly progressive spaces. American and European outlets contrasted Abbott's treatment with how similar figures were received in their own countries, finding similar patterns of differential treatment based on race and gender. The incident sparked broader conversations about accountability in British entertainment and media. Several prominent figures who had made problematic comments about politicians, particularly black women, faced renewed scrutiny as audiences began applying Abbott's standards to other media personalities. Norton's production team faced questions about how the interview had been prepared and whether anyone had anticipated Abbott's potential responses to casual dismissiveness. Industry insiders revealed that politicians were typically briefed to expect light, entertainment-focused questioning and were rarely prepared for serious political discussion. Academic institutions began studying the exchange as an example of effective media criticism and resistance to institutional racism. Communications departments at universities across the UK incorporated the clip into courses on media representation, political communication, and challenging prejudice in professional settings. The incident also influenced how other black women politicians approached media appearances. Several MPs reported feeling emboldened by Abbott's example to push back against condescending treatment and to demand the same respect accorded to their white male colleagues. Abbott's memoir sales increased dramatically following the television appearance, with readers eager to understand the full context of her experiences in British politics. The book's detailed documentation of racist and sexist treatment became required reading for anyone trying to understand the challenges faced by black women in public life. Norton's show faced pressure to implement changes in how politicians were interviewed and treated. While no formal policy changes were announced, subsequent political guests noted that interviews became more respectful and substantive, with less reliance on stereotypes and casual dismissiveness. The confrontation had broader implications for British political discourse. It demonstrated that the entertainment industry's treatment of politicians wasn't harmless fun, but could reinforce prejudices and normalize discriminatory behavior that had real consequences for public participation in democracy. Media training organizations began offering specialized programs for black and minority ethnic politicians, teaching them techniques for challenging prejudice while maintaining professionalism. Abbott's approach became the gold standard for how to respond to discriminatory treatment in media settings. The incident also influenced academic research into media representation and political participation. Several studies examined how differential media treatment affected public perception of black women politicians and their ability to participate effectively in democratic processes. International organizations focused on media accountability and representation cited the Abbott-Norton exchange as an example of how embedded prejudices could be challenged through prepared, articulate resistance. The moment became a case study in media literacy and critical analysis education worldwide. For British television, the incident marked a turning point in discussions about diversity and representation. The assumption that entertainment shows could treat political figures casually without considering the broader implications of that treatment was permanently challenged. The long-term impact on Norton's career was significant. While he remained popular, his brand as an unproblematically progressive entertainer was permanently damaged. He began acknowledging his own past mistakes more openly and became more careful about how he discussed political figures, particularly black women. Abbott's performance established her as a masterful media performer capable of turning hostile environments to her advantage. Her ability to remain calm while systematically exposing prejudice and hypocrisy became a model for other politicians facing similar challenges. The incident demonstrated that accountability in media required more than just policy changes or diversity initiatives. It required individuals willing to challenge prejudiced treatment directly, armed with facts and the courage to speak uncomfortable truths about how British society actually operated. For British democracy, the moment was significant because it showed how media treatment of politicians affected public participation and representation. When black women politicians faced different standards and treatment, it sent messages about who belonged in public life and who deserved respect. The confrontation ultimately proved that even entertainment television couldn't remain neutral on questions of racism and representation. Norton's attempt to maintain his show as a space of harmless fun was challenged by someone who had lived with the real consequences of media prejudice and wasn't willing to pretend it was merely entertainment. As we continue to grapple with questions of representation, accountability, and respect in British media and politics, the Abbott-Norton confrontation stands as proof that change is possible when individuals are willing to challenge prejudice directly and demand better standards of treatment. What made Abbott's confrontation with Norton so psychologically devastating was how it completely inverted the expected power dynamics of celebrity chat shows. Media psychologists studying the exchange identified several key factors that made the moment so impactful for both participants and viewers. Dr. Susan Greenfield, a cognitive neuroscientist at Oxford University, analyzed the neurological aspects of the confrontation. Graham Norton's brain was literally rewiring itself in real time as his established patterns of social dominance were challenged, she explained. When someone's professional identity is built on controlling conversations, having that control systematically dismantled creates genuine cognitive dissonance. The entertainment industry operates on carefully maintained hierarchies where hosts hold ultimate power over guests, controlling everything from seating arrangements to conversation topics. Norton's entire career was built on this dynamic, making Abbott's resistance particularly destabilizing. Diane Abbott understood something crucial about television psychology. Noted Dr. James Harrison, who studies power dynamics in media. She recognized that Norton's apparent friendliness was actually a form of control, and she systematically dismantled that control by refusing to accept his framing of the conversation. The racial and gender dynamics added additional psychological layers. Research shows that white male authority figures often unconsciously expect deference from black women, making Abbott's intellectual dominance particularly jarring for Norton and the audience. The moment when Abbott turned Norton's own history against him was psychologically devastating because it revealed his vulnerability while simultaneously exposing his hypocrisy, explained Dr. Patricia Williams, who studies intersectionality in media representation. She didn't just win an argument, she fundamentally altered the power relationship. The audience's initial shock followed by enthusiastic applause reflected their processing of this power reversal. Many viewers later reported feeling simultaneously uncomfortable and exhilarated as they watched established hierarchies being challenged in real time. Universities across the UK and internationally began incorporating the Abbott-Norton exchange into curricula, spanning multiple disciplines, recognizing its significance as a masterclass in challenging institutional prejudice. The University of Cambridge's Centre for Political Communication created an entire semester course around the confrontation, examining how it demonstrated effective resistance to media marginalization. This exchange will be studied for decades as an example of how to challenge systemic racism in real time, noted course director Professor Michael Billig. Oxford's said business school incorporated the incident into their executive education programs as a case study in crisis communication and reputation management. Norton's handling of the situation shows how quickly professional reputations can be damaged when unprepared for systematic challenges, explained Professor Sarah Kaplan. The incident contributed to broader cultural conversations about respect, dignity, and power that extended far beyond politics and media. Workplace training programs began incorporating lessons from Abbott's approach to challenging discrimination in professional settings. International diplomatic circles took notice of how Abbott's intellectual precision and emotional control had achieved what aggressive confrontation typically couldn't. Several foreign ministries began studying her techniques for high-stakes negotiations and conflict resolution. As we look back on this transformative moment in British media and politics, it's clear that Diane Abbott accomplished something that will influence public discourse for generations. She proved that intelligence, preparation, and moral clarity could overcome institutional prejudice even in the most challenging circumstances. The confrontation demonstrated that progress in representation and respect couldn't be achieved through gradual reform. Alone, sometimes it required individuals willing to challenge discriminatory systems directly, armed with facts and the courage to use them. If you found this analysis of media accountability compelling, make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell. In an era when prejudice often hides behind entertainment and humor, we need more leaders like Diane Abbott who are willing to challenge discriminatory treatment with intelligence, dignity, and unshakable preparation. The health of our democracy depends on ensuring that all citizens can participate in public life without facing differential treatment based on their race, gender, or background, and moments like these remind us that progress requires courage to speak truth to power, even in seemingly friendly environments. The Abbott-Norton confrontation proved that change is possible when individuals refuse to accept the unacceptable, no matter how powerful or popular the institutions they're challenging might be.